Welcome everybody. It's February the 11th, 12th, sorry, and we're recording PHP Town Hall episode 19. We're joined once again by Ben Edmonds and Zack Kitzmiller. And Jeffrey, if you want to say hello, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. My name's Jeffrey Way. I've done a lot of things in the last 5 years. You probably know me. I was the editor of NetTuts Plus for like 5 years. So I worked at Envato. I worked on some of our code-specific marketplaces like ThemeForest. I managed for a little while, and then we launched a marketplace called Code Canyon, and that's where like if you build various components that you want to sell, you could actually sell it through Code Canyon. So I did that for a while. I do lots of video tutorials. I'm the owner of Laracasts. Yeah, that's me.
So I guess one of the most recent exciting things you've been working on is Laracasts, which a lot of our listeners are Laravel fans. We've had Taylor on the show twice, so I'm guessing they'll be interested to know what you're up to at Laracasts.
Yeah. Laracast, yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. So here's kind of the backstory on that. I was working for Envato recently, and I worked on a platform called Touch Premium, and that's basically like we do all these courses, and every few days we release a new course on everything, everything from development to audio. But I started to get to the point where I was really getting into Laravel. I got into it like right when Taylor launched version 3 is when I started getting into Laravel, and I liked it so much. So I wanted to focus on it more. And also, I was kind of migrating over. I'd been doing so much JavaScript work, and I don't think JavaScript is nearly as bad as some people do, but I was doing a lot of JavaScript work, but it was starting to wear me down. So I was kind of switching back over to doing more back end kind of work. So I don't know. I decided that I wanted to have kind of a similar subscription model to Touch Plus Premium, but specifically for Laravel and modern PHP. So yeah, recently, like after 5 years, decided to step down from Envato and Touch, and that was a big deal for me. I've been working at Touch and Envato for so many years. Like a half decade of my life was dedicated to some of their various products. So this was a big deal for me, at least, especially like to to create a site like Laracast. I don't know. I guess we'll see how it goes. So now I focus on Laracast. I'm going to do a little bit more freelance work than I did before. I'd like to do more open source work than I've been doing in the past. So yeah, a lot of things on my table at this point. I hope it turns out okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it will. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, I guess, what your role was at NetTuts and generally what you were doing there. Because were you the founder of NetTuts? I never really looked into it.
No,
I knew you were the editor, but
I'd love to take credit. No, but you know what? I was at NetTuts like when I got hired, NetTuts had maybe like 1,000 RSS subscribers, and I actually thought that was a huge number at the time because you have to remember this was like back in 2008. So all of this stuff, like to put it in perspective, like when NetTuts launched, jQuery I don't think existed yet. So just to kind of put it in perspective.
wow.
So I didn't create NetTouch. Collis Taid, he's the CEO of Envato. He's basically the vision behind Envato. He launched a site called PSD Tuts, and that's like a tutorial site specifically for Photoshop, but like high quality Photoshop tutorials. And then NetTouch was launched literally over the course of a weekend. As I was told, like on a Saturday, Collis thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did something similar to PSD Touch, but specifically for web development? And over the weekend, they launched NetTouch. And then it got to the point, like, as probably many of the people watching or listening to this know, like we just kept adding more and more. So we added one for audio, we added one for design, and I can't even think of all the various sites that we have now. And at this point, they've all been merged into like one Touch Plus website, but it wasn't like that a few years ago.
No, I remember when there were like a million different sites. I mean, I remember NetTuts been around for a long time, and it's interesting you say it's done in 2008 because it just seems like one of those sites that I always remember being around and always remember landing on with Google.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the cool thing about NetTouch, especially a few years ago when you came on is people didn't know how big it was. I think people thought it was just, a website that had web development tutorials, but our traffic was like kind of ridiculous. We had like millions of visitors to the site every single month. So NetTuts, like before NetTuts, I was never an editor. I was just some guy that like liked web development, and so I got invited. Like I wrote a couple articles for NetTuts, and then it was just kind of serendipitous. The guy who was editing NetTuts, I don't think he lasted more than about a month, and they were kind of out in a lurk. So they offered the job to me, and then I did it for a handful of years. So NetTuts was really my baby, more or less from the beginning, giving a few months. But yeah, it gets to a point. It's not good to stay anywhere too long. I'm sure you guys would agree. So 5 years was at that point, like I'd learned everything that I could possibly learn at Envato. So I think it was time to kind of move out on my own.
Now, you threw out a couple of tweets about you didn't like how they kind of de-emphasized community, I guess. Do you want to talk about that a little? And how maybe you think that with Laracast?
I should actually note that I deleted those tweets after. No. I have.
Well, we can cut this if you want.
No, you're good. I really honestly have nothing.
Hold on. The question, Phil, was he threw out a couple tweets about how part of the reason he left was because he felt that they were de-emphasizing the community with NetTuts Plus. And that was kind of the direction he wanted to go with Laracast.
No. I think that came out wrong. That's why I deleted the tweet. I really have nothing bad I could possibly say about Envato and Tuts. It was a very good experience for me. It was very good specifically for me because it allowed me to have a job specifically while I was spending all of my time learning. So it was kind of like a lot of people who went to university. I didn't really do that. I did everything on my own. So NetTuts was amazing because I was getting paid to learn. So every time some new technology came out, I was able to learn it, and I was actually getting paid for it. So like that was amazing. So I couldn't possibly have done some of the things that I've done today without Envato and Tuts. So I really had nothing bad I could possibly say about them. But what happened was I got to the point where, like, I'm trying to think how I could say this. I got to a point where I wanted to have more control over where things went. And Tuts was amazing, but it was starting to go in a direction that wasn't necessarily applicable to me. Like I wanted to build NetTuts specifically into this like massive community specifically for web development, and Tuts was kind of going more like we're going to teach everyone, and that's really cool. Like that's a major aspiration for the CEO of Envato to have, but it wasn't necessarily what I was interested in the most. I wanted to focus more on code. So it got to the point where I kind of wanted to break out and really have more control over specifically what I did. And another thing was like I was working at tutsplus.com, which is Tuts Premium. That's like our premium branch at Envato. And I was doing too much managerial work, just too much. Like I was spending so much time in Basecamp. And, it's like, I don't want to be doing this. I like to code, I don't want to be like organizing projects in Basecamp. So it just got to the point. It was time to go.
It did start. It did start to get very Basecamp heavy. There was like a lot of conversation starting up around, should we do an article on this or should we do an article on that? And then all the people that usually write the articles were talking about which technology they preferred and why they should do an article on the other one. And
right.
I get it. Like it's really useful to have that discussion amongst people that are interested in writing these articles. But at the same time, I was like, I haven't written an article for you guys in like 2 years. I don't care. I'm gonna leave now.
Well, yeah, because it's like if you've written an article, you're immediately part of that group. Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, in our defense, like we have such a massive author base at Tuts, so you need some way to kind of communicate with everyone. So Basecamp is really fantastic for that. But yeah, it just got to the point I was so tired of dealing with all that like organization and scheduling, and I'm a developer. I don't like doing that stuff.
That's fair enough. One of the things about Laracasts is obviously half the name is Laravel. One of the questions that I'm sure you get a lot is, what are the plans? Is it going to be just Laravel forever? Because you did mention earlier that it was going to be kind of Laravel and modern PHP. What sort of things are you trying to achieve with Laracasts and the videos?
I'm assuming it's going to evolve into something a little bit more for modern PHP. Originally, this just turned out like the Ruby community had Railscasts, which is like fantastic. Railscast, I've watched so many episodes of it. I'm sorry to see that Ryan doesn't. I don't know what's going on with Ryan at this point. Actually, he he said something like he needed a break. I honestly don't know the status of this, but he keeps delaying his return. And if you check his Twitter feed, I don't think he updated it. So I'm starting to wonder, like, what happened to Ryan Bates? But I think maybe he just burned out. Anyways, I wanted a
top level web developers that just eventually decided I'm just going to go and be like a kickboxing expert in the middle of Hawaii somewhere. He's just like, I'm done with this.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. I can't blame them. Like, this stuff is so hard. People don't talk about this enough. Like coding is like ridiculously hard. For the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or so, like every single day I'm working on this stuff, and I still feel like a hack sometimes. Like I am a hack compared to some of these people. And it's like, man, you have to dedicate like a decade of your life into this stuff just to get to the point where you feel confident enough, to actually work on some of these larger projects. So I don't blame that these guys like just kind of burn out. And it's so funny, like they don't just burn out and do something else. They do the complete opposite. They just completely leave their development. They leave computers and they end up being like, Boy Scouts people.
Like why just disappeared off the face of the earth for like 3 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Rick Ellis of Coding Night of Fame, he was the example of the kickboxer. I think he's into like Brazilian Muay Thai or something, and he's just not doing computers anymore.
Well, Rick's kind of different too, because he kind of made his fortune,
Honestly, yeah. I wish that would happen to me. Like, I don't want it to happen now, but in 10 or 15 years, I wouldn't mind just completely leaving all of this. I mean, like to stay up
10 or 15 years. I was thinking 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I'm 28, so. By the time the thing is, like, once I'm 40 or when we are 40, I don't know if we can keep up at the point where you have like children, and I don't know. Like, I feel like it's a young person's game. I have a brother who's been a developer for a very long time, and he talks about this a lot. Like, once you get married and you have kids, it just gets to the point you can't keep up with these guys that are 21 years old that are like we all were like that probably. You're a sponge at 21 where you just soak up everything you can. And I think it gets to the point. Go ahead.
Sadly enough, that's probably where, kind of you look at the big corporations and, you see the 40-year-old .NET developer,
right?
Working 9 to 5 and going home. That's probably where that comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
That's us in 20 years,
Yeah. So I would be perfectly fine in 10 years or so, just completely leaving all of it and doing something totally different.
Ben, what's your plan for when you're done with computing?
I don't know if they'll ever stop, because even when I, try to get away, I can't. So I don't see myself being a straight up developer for someone else. At least I hope not at that point. Hopefully I can be like Jeffrey when I grow up and do what I want to do.
Do you think do you see it as addictive? Do you feel like coding is addictive at all?
Yeah, well, I think the bad part is because it started as a hobby and then it became a career. So now, in a lot of ways, I'm really one-dimensional. So, like, what's your hobby? Coding. What's your career? Coding.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad, but it's also kind of good because I love what I do.
I think a lot of developers end up that way. I mean, if you give a developer 2 weeks or a month off work, what are they going to do? They're going to start coding. I got involved in Fuel PHP because I had 3 months off work, and I was like, well, so I might as well code then. I think that happens a lot. Hack projects, like you go away for a conference and you're like, cool, I don't have to work all weekend, and then people get in a room.
We spend all weekend working.
Right.
We didn't spend our weekend working in Miami.
Not Sunshine this one, but usually. Sunshine was great.
Yeah, so how was that?
It was really good. I really enjoyed quite a bit.
For those that don't know, we're talking about a Sunshine PHP conference that just finished.
Phil and I went. Phil and I went with our good friend Jose, which you may know of as Savant, who manages and maintains Homebrew PHP, and we all went down together and learned some things.
Yeah, we were on the same flight, and we were all meant to be sitting in coach, and Zack got upgraded to first class for free. So
Sometimes
How
when
did
you,
that happen?
well, you know, I used to fly a lot, and I still had some status on the airline, so they had an empty seat and they gave it to me.
And they were like, "Hey, so there's two of you, but we've only got one seat." And he was like, "Fuck those guys." Anyway,
You know,
the conference.
it's weird though. First class isn't what it used to be. First class used to be like the elite. It's really like, especially on some airlines now, first class isn't that different from coach, but it's like $1,000 more. Every time I go on a flight, I think, oh, I'm just going to splurge and do it. And then you actually compare the prices, and it's ridiculous.
See, so this is something that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that we've ever talked about. But Anthony Ferrer and I were talking about it at Sunshine. And like in the last 10 years or so, first class is not the seats for the rich. It's the seats for the people that fly a lot. Because if you're like, when I started working at SeatGeek, I commuted back and forth from Chicago to New York every other week. And you just kind of get tired of the tiny little seat. And most of the people that are sitting in first class fly every day or every week. And it's just sort of like changed over the last, handful of years.
Yeah, I can
in
see
my
that.
mind.
I mean, I
It's
fly
like
a lot, but I don't fly every week. And to me, though, like economy comfort is close enough that I'll pay the $50 for economy comfort, but I won't pay the $500 for first class.
Every time I've ever sat in first class, I was sitting next to someone that was like, "Oh yeah, they upgraded me." Not someone that was like, "I dropped $2,000 on a ticket."
The other major difference is that it's not really just for people that are so rich that money has no meaning and they don't know what dollars are. It's just mostly because you can't be like a businessman and you can't have a overnight Atlantic trip, cross Atlantic trip, and then go straight into being like a shark in a meeting room. Like you can't. You're just too fucking tired. Like I just spend an entire afternoon just kind of stumbling about and walking into things. So like the extra money is usually paid for by a company. And it's definitely because you have to, and not just because you're, too pathetic to deal with smaller seats. I've only done it once, like each way, in first class in Virgin, and it was amazing. I just had this whole nest, and I was just lying down with the vibrating seat on, like before we'd even taken off, with my glass of whiskey, charging my iPad and my iPhone in separate USB sockets. And I was like, I never want to leave my cocoon of comfort. It's fucking brilliant.
There was also the problem with Sunshine is that I showed up Friday morning 4 Bloody Marys in because they're free.
Oh, you cut that number down a little bit.
It's debatable as to it depends on how you count a double.
Okay.
He's averaging for his size.
Okay, because I'm just saying, all I heard all day was I've had 6 Bloody Marys and now we're drinking this massive pitcher and this huge bottle of whiskey.
So I'm pretty sure it was 4 Bloody Marys, but 2 of them were doubles. So you can count that however you want. Yeah,
the
let's
weird
not
thing
do
is
that.
these people who like dress up in suits to get on these flights. I guess they have to, maybe because they're going directly to
Straight to a
offices.
meeting.
But I feel so bad for these guys that's like 8 in the morning and they're in this full suit. I've worn a suit maybe once or twice. I feel so bad for them. They probably feel bad for me because I'm in jeans.
That's exactly it. They're like, man, look at this schmuck.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeans. What an ass.
Like they still have beepers or something.
Yeah.
But
I'm
anyway,
very glad I'm
Sunshine
not in that
PHP.
line of work.
Let's get back to that one. So what are the real highlights of Sunshine PHP? There were yellow elephants being handed out. I've got one over there somewhere.
Oh, I saw those at
there you go.
Ski.
Wait, it's there. There it is. Oh, Ben, you keep talking. Never mind.
Can't see it.
So are the yellow elephants, is that related to the women of PHP thing? I know there's some new website I keep seeing on Twitter.
I think they're purple for women.
Got my first
women.
little yellow one. Apparently they got loads. There's red ones and green ones and all sorts of shit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Is this the Kickstarter thing that I saw on Twitter?
No, yes, it's not that one either.
PHP women are doing a Kickstarter for the purple elephant, which is going to help them send representatives out to more conferences, which helps get their name out there and helps raise awareness of the course and a bunch of other things, I think. So that's definitely a good one. Google search for the PHP Women Kickstarter, and you can get one of these that's purple. I think they might have already sold a bunch of them, but whatever.
There was another Kickstarter that just ended too. I think it was PHP Architect, maybe ran one.
Oh, okay.
For another elephant.
Well, once you got one, it's addictive. I want all of the fuckers now. So
I'm fine with the one.
How we got that one was great because we just followed the organizer of the conference out to his car at the end in the dark, and we took them from him. So that worked out pretty well. But yeah, Sunshine PHP was pretty good. It was great. It was a really well-run conference. It was a great hotel venue. Nothing went wrong, which is, I always like to ask people that organize conferences. So what went wrong behind the scenes? Because after doing a couple of shitty little ones myself, it's always interesting to know. And he just had nothing. He was like, no, everything went perfectly fine. There's usually something like the television exploded and we had to replace it last minute. But,
Phil and I were on a podcast and made fools of ourselves as always.
I did not. I'm not going to listen to that podcast. Like, I do this one drunk all the time, but goddamn, we were hammered.
Right. Now, Cal usually does his pretty not over 18 style. So how bad were
this
you?
one is? Like,
So at the beginning of the podcast, he says, "Everyone got fucked up. Don't listen to this one because it's inappropriate."
Yeah, he said,
awesome.
"Okay, so Phil Sturgeon, would you like to tell us a little bit about your book?" And I said, "Can I swear?"
Wait, is this the one? Like, I saw something on Twitter, Zach, about you getting in an argument with somebody.
Yeah.
And that's saved for part 2. What happened there?
So I don't remember exactly what happened. It's a little blurry because Phil and I had 40s, and
that is
anyway,
you and Larry Garfield had a massive dispute about something, and I'll be fucked if I can remember what.
No, it was the "Don't Be a Dick" license.
No, that was a follow-up. I think, yeah, we just, for some reason, were arguing saying everyone should use dbad for everything, which was hilarious.
Yeah, I got in an argument with, I think, just Larry at Drupal, and it ended well. It ended well. You'll have to listen to part 2 of the podcast because part 1 was pretty mundane.
Are you sure it ended well, or you just forgot how it ended?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Are you sure it ended well, or did you forget how it ended?
No, I'm sure it ended well because I remember it being over, and I was like, "Larry, I'm sorry I was an ass," and he was like, "No, you weren't an ass at all," and I was like, "Oh, sweet."
I definitely got into an argument with Paul Jones, which was fun because we don't do that regularly.
Oh man, arguments with Paul are just awesome.
Yeah. So.
Hey, I didn't tell you. He actually I met him at Ski PHP for the first time in person.
Oh, nice.
And so after my talk, we went to the lobby, ordered a couple drinks, and sat down slide by slide and went through my presentation and pretty much argued about every portion of the Laravel.
Give me some examples.
Well, his main thing was facades, and so it's all semantics for him. So he can't stand that.
So
Taylor calls it a facade, but it's not a facade pattern.
Why do you guys think people are so pissed off about that?
We can jump back to the conference stuff in a second, the pool stuff in a sec. That is something that really does annoy me. So I personally have a list of not necessarily gripes, but like concerns and things that I think are valid pieces of feedback about Laravel. And I've given most of them to Taylor. And there are things that I think are important that it should focus on. There are things that I think don't fucking matter whatsoever. And one of those things is.
Oh, now you're sounding like me.
Yeah, just like like when we talk about PSR2. But I feel like just because it says facade, but it's not the facade pattern. If you look at Wikipedia or like any design patterns book, there's probably there's like a design pattern for every single word you can think of. So you're kind of screwed. Like he said, this is a facade. He hasn't said this is the facade design pattern. He's just said this is using something I call a facade. In the same way that he has, this is something I call a composer, and it's not the composer design pattern. So it's mostly just people looking for something to bash Laravel about. And because they haven't used it enough, they don't have anything useful to bash. I have a couple of things that I want to bash because I've used the fuck out of it. So I feel like if you're just sitting there taking pot shots, then it's pretty easy to tell most of the time. Like, it's all static. That's not a facade. Like, it's all
but I mean, to give Paul credit, for him it's not a pot shot because he's not like that. But for him, actually, the semantics of it.
I know, it sure does seem like he has it out for Taylor.
Well, so
a lot of people have it out for Taylor.
Whether anyone is specifically trying to attack Laravel and using shitty things to do it, or whether they are simply complaining about something that doesn't really matter at all, is kind of the same problem. I assume Paul's falling into the latter category of not trying to attack it, but just complaining about something that doesn't matter. Like that doesn't matter at all. The fact they call it a facade, in the same way that like composer and presenter, there are all design pattern like terms that relate around those, and they don't always kind of line up. It's not like when Ellis Lab decided to pick Active Record for a pattern that was not.
Oh God, that is like the worst decision that's ever happened.
Yeah, and do you know who fixed that in version?
But you know what? It comes back to this idea like people don't. It comes back to like people don't agree on some of this terminology. Sorry. Like I don't worry about it too much. People don't agree on these patterns or principles and stuff. Everyone has a different word, you just join a different community, and it's completely different. So I don't know, like if you want to get mad at Taylor because he calls something a facade that you don't think is a facade, who cares? Honestly. It's in the Laravel community, this is what we refer to as a facade, And I don't know. I feel bad for him a little bit. Like on one hand, he's built I think Taylor's incredibly important to the PHP, like ridiculously important in our community. But then at the same time, if you read some of these Reddit comments, people are kind of jerks to him. And
there's no kind of about that. They're being crazy motherfuckers recently.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like somehow it's like Taylor's probably listening to this. Somehow it's turned into like Taylor being a jerk. And honestly, I'm just not seeing that. I see like he releases this free stuff on top of his job, and then people like just want to poke their fingers in it all the time. And then you're surprised when people are a little bit sensitive. You forget like there are actually other people on the other end of Twitter or GitHub or Reddit, and it's like developers, there's this, idea that developers aren't good with other people. You always see people joke about that. And it starts to seem like maybe that's true because people are really rude on Twitter if you actually read some of these dialogues. Yeah. And maybe that's just because, like people don't use smiley faces, so you never actually know what somebody's thinking on the other end. Kind of like the thing with you, Phil, when you were talking about Laravel and silos. It's like if you don't have any emotion on the other end, you don't know if the person's just being casual or if they're actually, having a go at you. And yeah. I have no idea what I'm trying to say here, but it's
it's actually really interesting that you brought up those points because a lot of these things were brought up in the podcast Phil and I were talking about earlier, where people, start to confuse free as in beer and free as in freedom, which is a point that Paul Jones actually made on the podcast we were with him. But there is this whole mentality that we talked about. I feel like I had this exact conversation last week because I did. But this entitlement thing where, somebody gives you something for free and then you expect that for free and you expect them to fix it when it breaks and you expect everything to be perfect forever because somebody said, here's a bit of code I wrote, you can have it. And then you expect lifetime support and everything else for the rest of your life.
So there's been a lot of anti-Laravel stuff recently. I think we've all probably noticed a lot of this. And one of the reasons I put on that is if you look at go to Google Trends. I'll try and put a link to this in the show notes. Go and look at Google Trends, look at and put in keywords for different frameworks. And you put in Kohana and Symfony and ZF2, whatever. Put in as many frameworks as you can think of, and then put in Laravel, and you'll notice that in the last it's just come out of nowhere and hockey spiked. And in the last 6 months, when the largest chunk of that, the upturn of the hockey stick really happened. And I feel like the last 6 months has been when everyone's trying to have a little fucking go at it. So I think I said something along the lines of everyone's trying to have a go at Laravel. That's what happens when a piece of software gets popular. And everyone went, oh, and that's the only reason, not because it's shit or anything. And it really just is. The number of people that have been looking at it recently, it's going to get a lot of feedback. But I do feel like there are ways in which Taylor can go about doing things that will make these things slightly easier. Just by getting more people on the core team, having their involvement more publicly advertised, like Sean McCall and Dale Reese. They're on the core team, but everyone still calls Laravel a one-man show. So there are like a lot of these little things that I feel like really do.
But would you expect anything else?
Sorry, go Ben.
Like
Taylor feeds into that though. Just like a week ago, he posted about. I'm glad that Laravel's a dictatorship, basically. So I think it's a conscious decision on his part to kind of model himself after the BDFL of Laravel. And
Yes,
so in a lot of ways, I think he wants to downplay other contributors.
No, I don't think that's true at all.
There's a lot of the time.
I don't think that's true at all.
He makes a lot of these jokes where he says, Laravel is the best framework in the world. Like, in the context of that whole conversation, you see that and you know that it's a joke because he's a really nice guy. But then someone takes that one tweet. I complained to Paul about this in person as well. But when you take that one tweet out of context and inject it straight into a blog completely fresh with no context, that makes him look like he's saying, my framework's the best in the world.
No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. But, I mean, do you guys not think that Taylor is modeling himself as a BDFL in Laravel? It's not exactly a community effort.
I think for better or worse, BDFL is entirely accurate. And
I'm not saying it's right or
like
wrong.
A whole lot of
that's what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I've never understood if that's a slur or not, but
honestly, guys,
I would say that that's the case in this situation.
So BDFL is benevolent dictator for life, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Honestly, I just had to research that. No, I do not think Taylor's doing that at all. Honestly, whenever you hear Taylor talk about Laravel, he says we. Everything is we, even though I think, he does most of it in the end. And I think, honestly, that's probably a good thing. That's why Laravel progresses the way it does. So I don't think he likes to, I mean, honestly, not honestly, but of course he wants to make himself synonymous with Laravel. That's just good for his career. That's not a bad thing at all, right? Why would that be bad?
BDFL
I'm not saying it's bad.
It's not a bad thing. I mean, you see people on this list like, Guido and many other people on the BDFL list. It doesn't make it a bad thing. It's just, one person stands up, takes the reins, and runs something the way he thinks it should be ran. It's not necessarily negative.
Right, but it seems like people attack him for that.
You always need one person at the top, right? You always have to have the one kind of, like Fabian Potenza is obviously definitely the BDFL of the Symfony community.
Right.
And there are lots of other people involved that have to say as well.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make is, so if we counsel Taylor or someone, Phil in this case, counselors Taylor, that he should make it more the community thing, I don't know if that's necessarily an oversight on Taylor's part. It's more as a conscious decision of trying to model himself as the BDFL for all the advantages that gives, but also the disadvantages. So I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's going to have negative feedback and it's going to have positive things.
Maybe, honestly, I think it's a good thing. So for all the people that say Laravel needs to be more community-based, I would say, like, okay, what more do you want? Like, Laravel uses more community packages than from what I hear, any other framework in existence. So he's already leveraging a huge amount of the community. Next, a huge number of people contribute to Laravel. So yes, Taylor is synonymous with Laravel, but that's a good thing, right? Like, I don't necessarily understand why that's a bad thing. People who keep asking, Laravel needs to be more, I don't know what they're trying to say. Maybe more people should vote, kind of like PHP Core, where people vote on every new feature. Well, when you allow for that, well, then you're also getting away from the thing that made Laravel great. His instincts are what made Laravel great. So if you want to, I don't know, like create this scenario with Laravel where a panel or some group, votes on what happens next for Laravel, I don't think that's a good thing. I kind of like that we have a dictator, But a huge number of pull requests are accepted.
I can't remember how we got started onto this one. Just to be clear, that it was never me complaining about whether PDF, I don't know.
We were talking about
let's blame this one on
possible
Ben.
gripes with Laravel, and we were saying, no, I stand by the fact that he's a BDFL, but I don't say that's a slur at all.
Yeah,
I'm trying to state the fact that I think he chooses that role. But anyway, so we were saying possible gripes with Laravel. And we were saying, maybe more community
Yeah,
involvement.
what are some
But
other
I'm
gripes
saying
about
I think
Laravel?
that was a
Oh,
choice.
so some of the genuine complaints, well, not complaints, but like bits of feedback that a lot of people have. Some people whine about facades when it doesn't matter, and some other people whine about other stuff. One thing that would be good to talk about is the who wants to argue about like whether Laravel is actually siloing itself as against the community or not? Because what I kind of meant about that has been very
Phil's
much
children.
proven. Yeah, fuck. Here we go. But no, I've got this one. So something you brought up, Jeffrey, was that Laravel, and something that Taylor agrees on. You both say that Laravel is very much a community project and it's involved with the community because it leverages the packages of other communities, right? So it's got, it used to have Symfony routing, that's gone. It's got some of Doctrine's deval. It has various different packages like Whoops and a few other things knocking around. That's awesome. What it doesn't do is ship up its packages in a way that other communities can use them. The very main point of having packages in Composer so they're installable as a separate package is that you can install them as separate packages, right? I mean, that's pretty much the point. The problem is that you just can't do that. The one package in
Hang on a second,
Laravel,
guys. I'll be back.
All right.
okay. You've heard this rant anyway, it's fine. The one package that you can install separately outside of the whole Laravel or outside of including most of the Illuminate package is Eloquent. And the only reason that that works is because I hired a guy to make that work because it was fucking complicated. The trouble is that we haven't hired other guys to make other packages more accessible and they're still fucking complicated. So if you want to include Illuminate pagination, for example, which I've been working with for my Fractal package, which people should definitely check out. If you want to install pagination, it's very tightly coupled to the HTTP kernel, and it's you need a instance of the Vue class, and you have to include half of Illuminate to make that work. All of these packages could easily be cleaned up to be much less coupled, like reduce the coupling drastically using getters and setters and really basic things like that.
Right.
And I always knew that that was the case with Laravel, with the Illuminate packages from August 2012 when I first started using it, when Taylor first came by and said, hey, I've got these awesome Composer packages. It's like Laravel, but you can install them separately. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's what I've been asking for. That's amazing. Then I kind of tried setting them up by themselves, and you couldn't, and it was too complicated. And I was like, can you do this at some point in the future? And he's like, yeah, but right now I'm just trying to make, Laravel work, and I don't care about the rest. And I just want to make that work. And I was like, okay, that's fine for version 4, but then maybe we can put some README examples in for how you bootstrap them. And he was like, probably, yeah. And then 4.0 came out, and 4.1 came out, and 4.2 came out. And it's become more and more clear, like he's literally told me that he doesn't care about the packages working outside of that. So I feel like that's one valid complaint that people might have, and it's definitely what I mean when I say that packages, like it's not opening itself up to the PHP community. It's like, cool, we're going to take your packages and we're going to use them, and fuck you, you can't have ours because they don't work unless you spend 7 days bootstrapping.
I think that's valid. I think, honestly, that's valid. I've seen a few responses from him where he just kind of says that's not the top of his list. My hope and my instinct would be that's something that will eventually come. For example, here's a perfect example. The new tool he released is called Envoy. It's like a task runner for running various like bash commands on your remote server. That is completely contained. So if you wanted to use that outside of a Laravel app, you completely could. No issues whatsoever. So my instinct is like, you have to remember, like, yes, at the end of the day, Taylor is a dictator of Laravel. So that's a good thing. But along with that is also, there's only so many hours in a day. So he has his job with Userscape. He also has to develop Laravel. He also has to, work on the future of Laravel. So I can understand a little bit that at the end of the day, maybe making those various components usable outside of Laravel, at least without a huge amount of work, maybe isn't at the top of his list. But no, I think that's a completely valid complaint, and I would hope that eventually that's something that will be coming. But I could imagine just at the end of the day, it just comes down to how many hours in the day are there available for him. He has his full-time job. Just dealing with the number of GitHub issues. Like I don't even have a GitHub project even remotely close to Laravel, and I can't keep up with the various issues that. Maybe that says I'm a shitty developer. I don't know. No, but honestly, like every project,
family and kids.
Yeah, exactly. So I can totally understand it gets to the point like you can't keep up with all of this stuff. So you have to make sacrifices somewhere. So when he says that making those a little more portable isn't at the top of the list, I think of it less as him being, a jerk and more siloing Laravel, and more just saying, look, there's only so many hours in a day, and this is what I'm capable of doing right now. That's not at the top of the list.
Right.
And is that a bad thing? I just think that's valid, right?
I mean, that's literally what Ben was pointing out with opening up to the community a little bit more, I guess, where he says like, when it is a one-man show and he's the only one doing everything, that's kind of good, but at the same time, everyone's only got a certain amount of time, and therefore it'd be good if other people get involved. So
that's the real advantage of the community is that, hey, I know these things need to happen. Let me make issues for them or whatever to draw attention, and then let's let people work on them.
But the community didn't create Laravel.
Agreed. I'm not arguing with you on that point.
I think there is something to be said for that. Like I think eventually there's just Laravel will eventually turn to that point. But Laravel, like we forget, Laravel is really young. Like he went from version 1 to 4 in, I don't know, like less than 2 years, right?
2
so
years.
Yeah.
I can sort of understand it from his point of view. Like, look, Laravel is his baby, So people keep saying like, oh, you need to let this up for the community, and he already does to some extent. But I can understand if maybe he wants to hold on a little bit. Look, this is his creation,
Sure.
People should respect that to some extent, right?
Yeah, what I would like to see personally, and I've been through frameworks and languages over the years, I would like to see Taylor stay on his BDFL forever, but more focus on high level stuff. Taylor doesn't need to implement a cookie library, for instance. But if Taylor kept on for the high level stuff and then tried to outsource more the nitty gritty, just daily bullshit to the community, I think that would be a better thing. No, I don't want to make the whole podcast about, hey, what should Taylor do, because Taylor's not on here. So I would prefer we try to refocus a little bit,
I mean, I guess the one thing I wanted to do there, which didn't work at all, was more sort of highlight why Laravel's been getting a lot of stick by just not pointing out that just the hockey spike of madness there has really caused that, and highlight that a lot of what people complain about is pretty fucking petty, and what some of the good steps are for me for it to move forward would be. So if we can start a little bit of a movement, just like get a couple of people like me and Ben Corlett definitely would be interested in doing this, and just go through and start making more of the capsule classes that that really help bootstrapping for each one. Go through Illuminate and just kind of really make them work by themselves, and then send the right pull requests to Laravel so that 4.2 can be running on this nice set of decoupled packages. Then we have all these amazing Illuminate components that the entire internet PHP community can use, and then Laravel can use them too, and then everyone's pretty happy, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully that will come. Like, it certainly couldn't be a bad thing. It just comes down to like man hours. How many hours in a day are there to allow for that? Certainly that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and most likely too, if me and Phil, for instance, or Zack Spear, took it on ourselves to actually decouple these things for Laravel and submit a pull request, I don't doubt that Taylor would accept them. It's so we're probably complaining about something that we don't actually want to do the work to do in a way, but we do wish that it was promoted as something that's needed, because it is, because that's a big concern.
Maybe the point is if it was more obvious that a whole lot of work going into a pull request to completely abstract some of this stuff would almost certainly be accepted, then maybe more people would be willing to put the effort into doing it.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so what I'll do is I'll just talk to him. I'll just talk to him off air, and then find out if he gives damn about us starting a movement. Then I'll blog about it, see it, who is interested in joining.
Oh, don't blog. Stop blogging about stuff. Don't do that.
Okay, I'll never blog again. Cool.
Your blogs never end well.
I've got my
No,
new
Phil's
White
blogs are
website, and we've
perfectly
got
good.
that
It's
cycling.
just the absence of a smiley face.
It
If you would
takes
just do a
like
smiley
exactly.
face, it would fix everything.
Just one
it
little
takes like
And
an
the
emoji.
problem is
hour to
Phil
read
says
the
something.
blog.
The problem is Phil says something very,
Vague.
very aggressive. But at least on Twitter, it comes across very aggressive. So people respond with questions. Phil, you maybe assume that they're a little bit more aggressive than they are.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
problem is on Twitter, everyone assumes that every tweet is aggressive when it's not. It's just people
So,
asking questions.
hey,
But
the reason-
each person assumes that the other one is being a bit of a jerk. The truth is that nobody is being a jerk. So if we would all just do a little smiley face, then we would understand, like, look, we're just having conversations here. Nobody's upset. But it's
the smiley face.
it kind of makes me sad. It seems like. Go ahead.
Well, the smiley face is
Yeah.
great, but then and like the winky face is great because that shows that you're happy and you're smiling, and then everyone just assumes you're being a patronising douchebag. So there's no way to win. Anyway,
Yes,
It's your
this is true.
it's your accent.
This is
Phil.
true.
It's your accent's fault.
that's the problem. So one great thing is that people have said since before they met me, they assumed that I was being an arsehole. After they've met me at a conference or whatever, they read every tweet that I say in my accent, and then they love it, and they're just like, "Oh, I see his point now. Yeah, no, he's not being a dick."
All right. So what if you just did a Vimeo video for every tweet from now on?
Well, that's what I
Just
started
record
doing.
a
These YouTube
video.
blog rants.
Jeffrey,
Yeah.
I have a question for you that I've been meaning to ask you since we first met over a year ago. With Laracasts and the sort of stuff that you teach day to day, which is stuff that I think is incredibly amazing knowledge, do you ever consider that the stress you put on design patterns and correct best practice engineering principles is ever a negative factor to people that are just starting out?
Yes. Gosh, yes. The problem with Laracasts is I think sometimes it can come across as I really hope it doesn't come across this way, but I think sometimes it's like this is the right way to do it. And I would be the first person to say this is the right way for me to do it right now, but if I look at code I wrote a year ago, just like I think basically anyone, if you look at code you wrote a year ago, you think it's crap, like that's how quickly we get better. So that's something I guess I struggle with Laracast a lot. Every video that I post is kind of reflective of what I'm thinking at that given point in time. And that's why like Laracast is really new, but it's going to be really important that as I get better as a developer, those old videos that maybe I grow to disagree with have to be updated. So yeah, like I would never want to say this is the right way to do it, or you have to do it this way, because it's simply not true. And that's the hard thing. Like there's a bunch of different ways to do this. It depends on what you're building, and that's something I really struggle with Laracast is like, do I show you the quick way to do this? If you're, for example, let's say you're building like something really simple, a little tool. Well, the techniques that you might use for that are going to be very different if you're building a SeatGeek or if you're building, a big app. The techniques you use will be very different. So how do you help people, or how do you teach people while keeping that in mind, that it's completely dependent upon what you are building? Everyone like in the PHP community, like all the idea of like dependency injection and service
Right.
locators, all of this stuff is like a big deal right now. It wasn't people. This is how I know PHP will be okay. Is even 2 or 3 years ago, people weren't talking about this,
Right.
and they are talking about it now. But I don't know. It's entirely dependent upon what you're building.
Sure.
I
bring it up earlier today. I got into a discussion on Laravel off topic about some things that, had to do with, SeatGeek is a largely legacy application. The company's like 4 years old, but a lot of it's really old code, and it's hard to bring it up to, service locator speed. And got into a discussion with some guys in Laravel off topic about, how maintaining that or, building service providers is just pretty much impossible. And a lot of what you're doing is amazing, but could maybe make some people feel like they're just doing something wrong.
Right.
By not
what would
bringing
you
it up to
recommend
speed.
if you were doing my job? Like, what would you recommend?
No, I mean, I think what you're doing is great. and Laracast is great, and you know, a disclaimer as this is not the way every single application in the world is ever going to be engineered is, you know, more than sufficient.
I guess
Right.
I think the
And
problem
that's
you run into, Jeffrey, is you know, you're going to get a lot of the beginners. Like CodeIgniter had a lot of beginner programmers, and a lot of those have moved over to Laravel to its you know, benefit and detriment. And you know, I think that's kind of what Zach's saying here is, you know, people are going to think that this is how everything should work because this is the first thing they've learned. Maybe. Is that right, Zach?
I've seen people saying things like, I've just got into Laravel and I really like it, but I'm not entirely sure how I should unit test my controllers. And I'm like, fucking don't. Stop that. Like, you know, if you've just got into PHP programming and if you've just got into the framework, I get that it's really good to teach people, but I feel like a lot of people have started to pick it up as something that they have to do. So they've just started doing it and they're instantly unit testing all their controllers. And I feel like that's a really bad thing. Well, it's not a bad thing, but I feel like that might be something that a brand new user could easily get stuck in the mud in when they're not entirely sure how to fucking send a form full of data to create a user. Like when they can do something basic, trying to unit test a controller might be complicated and maybe a bad idea. But at the same time, you're right. It's crazy that beginners are even trying to do that in the first place. And it's cool that beginners are trying to do that because a few years ago, no one would have bothered. So it's one of those like tough way ups of like they probably shouldn't just yet, but it's good that they should, and maybe they should do it a little bit.
Exactly. Jeffrey?
honestly is really hard. Like I agree with everything all of you are saying, but when it comes to like, all right, when it comes to helping people and showing people what you've learned, that's really hard to get through. Is saying like this is one way to do it. Now there's three other ways. I feel like I've tried to do that. Like the last presentation that I gave at Laracon in Amsterdam, like the very first thing I said was this is one way to do it. You know, this is or this is what I have decided. Like this is what feels right to me, and what might feel right to you or your company might be different. You know, that's like it's hard to you don't want to say that at the beginning of every single tutorial or article or video you produce, but it's totally valid. I agree with everything you guys are saying, but when it comes down to actually showing somebody a technique, it's very difficult. The one that comes up more than anything, I've brought this up a few times, is repositories. Like Taylor started showing people repositories, so now every single person thinks they need to use repositories in their application. And it's like what I always say is, unless you know that you need to use repositories, you probably don't need to use them. You know, and that's the hard thing. People watch a video or read an article on how to use repositories, and they think that's the only way to do it. And they think they're not allowed to use simple facades in their controllers. And it's like, no, it just completely depends on what you are building. And that's been one of the hardest things with Laracast is trying to illustrate that it's entirely contingent upon what you are doing.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of beginners pick up repositories straight away. That's kind of what I was talking about with the how do I unit test my controllers and stuff. And yeah, people would kind of jump straight into the repository pattern. And I've had people come up to me and say like, so I've got all of these repositories and everything's working really well, but I still don't know why I need them.
Right, and it's like if you don't know why you need them, then you don't need them.
Something, I guess. And they're like, well, we're never going to switch to Mongo. I'm like, then you didn't need them.
Exactly. And that's the hardest thing to say. It's like, if you don't know why you need them, then you don't need them. But then I encounter people like they're trying to learn about best practices. They're trying to learn about how to build larger apps. So they try to integrate some of these higher level, like these techniques that were really meant for building large scale apps. They're trying to implement them into the smaller, you know, the demo projects that you build when you're trying to learn something. And you can't blame them. Like that's how you learn. You start out with these dummy projects, the task apps that exist everywhere. You know, this is hard.
All right, let me ask you another one since I've got you. Let's say you are a large scale application and the majority of it is written in PHP, specifically Symfony 1.1, and you want to start applying some of these best practices.
This sounds personal.
It's not, but let's say it is. What direction would you head first? Where would you start to go to modernize a incredibly legacy application when you have the whole team on board to begin to modernize, what's the first kind of consideration you think you would make? Like, is it testing? Is it like refactoring? What?
It would honestly be testing, but maybe like it depends. Like, not every application has to be. I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but like if you have some old application built on CodeIgniter, there's nothing that says like you have to upgrade it. I think people want to, but it's like if it works and it's built on CodeIgniter, then fine. So it comes down to like, all right, so if you've decided that you want to modernize or you want to upgrade to the latest version that's a little different, I don't know. I'd say the first thing would be tests. Like I don't know, how do you upgrade? How do you refactor without tests? I don't know how to do it.
I honestly figure it's like acceptance tests to like try hitting as many URLs and see if the whole thing completely breaks, and try and cover it with as many acceptance tests as possible. Then then you can start to recode without breaking that top outside layer. And then as you kind of refactor it, the new code can have some dependency injection goodness in there, and then you make sure your acceptance tests still work, and then you can start to unit test small sections, and like you pull out a layer. You have the MVC, but you keep pulling out one more layer so that you have repositories or something, or a domain object, and then you kind of keep pulling out one layer at a time and writing unit tests for that one layer, and then pull out another one. That sound about right, Jeffrey? Or?
No, I mean, that's what I would do. I can't imagine how you would do it otherwise. So it's like, all right, let's imagine that you have this legacy app that has 0 tests.
Sure, let's call that SeatGeek.com.
No, well, okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, but go ahead.
Okay, assuming that though, how would you confidently go about upgrading or changing this app without some tests confirming whether the changes you have made have broke anything or not? I don't honestly like. I'm sure there's a way because people have done this for many years before TDD was even a thing. But at this point, like I don't know how you would do it, and that's probably why most of these apps. Go ahead.
Do you believe in Ouija boards?
I would say you had a 40-man QA team before. That's how you do it. You have a 40-man QA team.
Yeah, exactly. You need a team dedicated to verifying whether what you did just screwed everything up. And that just sounds like I've never honestly worked in an environment like that. But I don't know. Like
they are truly scary.
Yeah, I would do exactly what Phil said. I would create acceptance tests to at least verify on a very outside-in perspective whether everything works or not, and then just slowly, incrementally do a little bit of refactoring and extracting. But yeah, it's hard. This stuff is really hard, and that's why I come back to like, it depends on what you're building. Maybe if you're building just a simple app that doesn't have to change, maybe it's okay that it runs on that older version. I don't know. That's why this stuff is so hard. And that's why I would retire in 10 years if I could, because it's too hard.
Yeah. Oh, good man.
Jones, who we were talking about earlier, has a book all about modernizing legacy web applications, which I'll put a link to in the show notes. And he will cover in depth how to do this shit. So anyway, guys, it's about time to wrap that one up. We talked about a bunch of stuff, and there will be links to the show notes, links in the footnotes for anyone who's interested in finding out more. So Jeffrey, thank you very much for joining us. It's been great having you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. It was good to have you. We didn't get to talk about Vim at all. We'll save that for next time.
Quickly, Vim or PHP Storm?
I don't know. Both. Both are ridiculously good. I would say Vim. I'd say PHP Storm if you hate IDEs. If you hate IDEs, check it out because it's.
We need to do a redux to this because I want to hear about PHP Storm versus Sublime.
Yeah, maybe next time. I've used so many of them. I'm kind of like an editor. I don't know. I'm obsessed with them. I love learning about workflow and all that stuff. That's really what I'm into is workflow. So yeah, maybe next time.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thank you very much again. And thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you all next time.
Cool.
All right. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.